Hello everyone, I am JustFold and I am here to bring you the first of hopefully many of our feature map presentations for the Swiss rounds. Today we're going to be looking at a set between Knight411 and Viking34 in the first round of the Swiss. Now Knight is going to start off by showing us his build. Does look like we have a good mix of tank. He's got the Arisen Fey Raven gear in the chest slot and a Lioness crown. And paired that with, looks like Demona's Shield and Niscus boost. Now, Demona's Shield does add to the stats, but also gives him debuffs. And he gets a little extra debuff boost from the Niscus boots. So, Knight is going to be playing an Assassin build here. Deity Assassin, you're going to be using the Celestial Loot, one of the better options for base Deity that some of the other classes don't get. Pretty standard mix, should be pretty versatile. Got a spell page here. Looks like we got a good mix of attack and magic spells. We got some buffs, some debuffs. Pretty standard. Now Viking is going to get the foresight advantage here. He's on pretty high ward build. It's going to be a spiked shield build. You'd think probably either like a spiked great shield with maybe like a Fey Cerberus Cuirass. Now we're going to get a glimpse at Viking's Amity, which he's running 2 of since he's on an Oracle build. Going to be at 5% ward regen with 5% mana. Now both of these guys are going to take their first couple turns buffing. Looks like we're both opting for Golem's Fortitude, double defense buffs. What is Knight going to go for here? Alright, well Knight has pretty high damage, so he's going to start right off the gate with Verse, and Viking does not have Ward of Ortonite, so it does take him to half health, but he does get the Ward of Ortonite proc from his pet. Knight did get the Deific Channel proc, which puts his defense too high for Viking to be able to penetrate with his Chain Shield, does zero him out. Now with the Dorado buff at minimum health, does get him close to taking out Knight, but not enough, leaves him at 1,000 health, and Knight is able to take that first game. The Amity choice is interesting. You would think that Viking probably doesn't have a legendary with 5% ward regen and maybe a more useful passive. The mana regen probably isn't going to do a lot for him here, but as a chain shield build or a spike shield build, you're going to want more ward regen. Now they're both going to elect to buff again. Viking is going to start with the damage buffs, hopefully get through and not get zeroed out on his chain shield. And Knight does elect to just, the buffing strategy is going to work. It's all going to pair really well once the Ashen Phoenix does proc. Now you think with the Chain Shield, Viking might have better luck with either Spike Shield 3 or Spike Shield 1. Might get a little bit more penetration out there. And after the buffing phase, it looks like Knight is just going to go right in. He's going to apply pressure, but if you apply pressure and you get him low, the Dorado passive does kick in, and it gives Viking the damage he needs to one-shot Knight in that second game. So right now we're 1-1. We're going to elect to buff defense this time. Now, he does get the minus attack buff, so if there was any other offensive debuffs that Knight could apply as an assassin, he would be able to get those through. Knight is getting the debuffs through. Looks like we do have blind immunity, but that's kind of secondary. Knight, it does have the damage, it seems, to apply enough pressure. Knight just doesn't want to get him almost dead and leave Viking with enough damage to one-shot him. But with the Ashen Phoenix buff, that should be all the damage that he needs. Going to apply a blind first just to be safe. Oh, but he did lose the Deific proc. Got a mix of blind and blight. Viking's in a tough spot, but he did bring Whiff Seal, so he's able to clear those out. And does, again, almost get him there, but gets Knight into passive, where Knight can just return and one-shot him. So this set is interesting. Neither of these guys want to get their opponent too low, and need to be able to build up enough damage to take out the whole health pool, because if they don't, it does leave the other guy in a spot to take it back with a one-shot and win. So now we're at 2-1 in Knight's favor for this first set. Viking's going to buff attack. Knight's going to buff defense. Defense seems to be working well for Knight. He knows by now that he can zero out Chain Shield, at least when it's not at low HP for the Dorado passive. What does Knight do here? Alright, Viking is going to go for the Gunner. The Gunner is a good strategy here. Might take a little bit of damage from the Phoenix, but it does give him the damage he needs to penetrate through, which is what he needs. Ward of Ort Knight is going to basically be the only defense that Viking is going to be able to rely on in this set, as he doesn't seem to have the defense to be able to stop Knight's damage. Okay, he gets him low. Gets the penetration, gets Knight low to about 2k health, but that does put DD into passive. Knight is going to elect for blind and blight, both stacked up. Try to prevent Viking from capitalizing here. But he does chain shield. The chain shield does get zeroed out, and Knight is too deep into passive for his next shot to one-shot and kill Viking and take that first set 3-1. Alright, now we are going to see Knight's build that he's bringing into set 2. It does look like we are going to be in get a swash build this time around from Knight. Now, I do recognize that Amity right away, so Knight is going to be rocking the 40% crit chance with 20% parapet. A very, very powerful Amity here, especially on a swash build. So we got a mix of foresight. We've got some accuracy from the Rift Rogue chest and legs. And why not just leave the Celestial Loot there? That's going to be perfect for him. So Knight's got a lot of damage with some foresight and some defenses. So we'll see what happens in this next set. Alright, now Knight does have the foresight advantage in the second set. He's going to lead off buffing damage. Now, with the damage that he looks like he had already brought in, doesn't really need to buff damage really any more than that in order to get through on Knight, on Viking. Knight did bring the Pumpkinhead pet, which is going to be the best pet for block chance. Now, we can see that Viking is not on an Oracle build anymore. I wonder what build we're on. Maybe Cataphract. But it doesn't matter. Knight's damage is tremendous at this point. And if we do not put Knight on a clock, Knight is going to put Viking on a clock, which he does. Viking leads out with Ward of Ort Knight right away. Hopefully it buys him a turn or two, but it doesn't. Knight is able to two-shot him once again, and that is going to be the way that this set goes if Viking doesn't change up and do anything differently. You think Viking's options here, maybe put Knight on the clock. You know, you don't think that Knight is going to really have any way to counter like a spike shield, chain shield here. And if Knight's going to buff damage on the first turn, you might have a window to do that here. But if we're buffing damage, if we're using Ward of Ort Knight in these first couple of turns, that does give Knight on the swash build a little too much time, and Knight does take the second set 3-0 to win the first match. Again, I am JustFold. I want to thank you all for participating, and we will see you next time.